Here's a sample of what you'll hear on this episode of Natural Health Matters. Okay, all that to say this. Yes, the fourth commandment is part of the Old Testament law given to the ancient Jewish nation, and we don't live by the law anymore because Jesus fulfilled the law. But there are principles we can learn from it, and one of those health-building principles is to take one day a week and abstain from work, rest and recharge our batteries, worship God, and connect with friends and family. If we do, it sure will be beneficial to our health and well-being. Welcome to the Natural Health Matters podcast, where it's all about maximizing your health potential so that you can pursue the abundant life more effectively. I'm your host, David Sandstrom, naturopathic doctor and biblical health coach, and this is episode number 67. This episode is part 13 in our series on the spiritual component of health. Today, we're going to be talking about obeying the biblical command to take one day off in 7, or observe the Sabbath day and keeping it holy. We're going to change things up a little bit with this episode. I'm bringing a guest on. His name is Joe Sanok, and he's got a new book out. It's called Thursday is the New Friday. And in just a bit, we're going to be talking with Joe about his new book. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the Bible has to say about allowing ourselves the freedom to take one day off in 7. The fourth commandment says, "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God." That's Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 and 9. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, especially this series on the spiritual component of health, then you know it's my contention that when God tells us to do something, it's for our benefit, and when He tells us to avoid something, it's for our protection. This command to observe the Sabbath day is no exception. I think it's interesting to note that most of the 10 commandments are presented in the negative sense or as a prohibition. Do not steal, do not lie, do not murder, do not commit adultery. Most of the 10 commandments are presented in that type of a negative fashion. You know, having too many restrictions is one of the criticisms we often hear toward Christianity or Judaism, and that there are too many restrictions on our personal freedoms, which of course is untrue, but a criticism nonetheless. But this commandment to observe the Sabbath is mostly presented in a positive fashion or an affirmative sense. We're admonished to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy and do all our work in 6 days. This command is not a don't or do not. It's mostly about doing. I often say, we maximize our health potential by aligning our lives more fully with God's natural design for spirit, mind, and body. When we're living our lives in harmony with that natural design, we increase our chances of experiencing more positive health outcomes. We can learn something by looking to centenarians, people that live to over 100 years old. There are 5 blue zones throughout the world where people quite frequently live to 100 years old or more. A researcher by the name of Dan Buettner found these areas when he searched for where people live the longest. The 5 zones are Okinawa, Japan, Korea, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and one location in the United States, which is Loma Linda, California. Loma Linda is about an hour east of Los Angeles, and they have about 250,000 people living there. The reason why Loma Linda is of special interest to our conversation today is they have a high concentration of Seventh-day Adventists living there. And what the research shows is that Seventh-day Adventists live on average 10 years longer than the general population. That's pretty significant. Some people say that the explanation for their longer lifespans is because there's a lot of vegetarians among the Seventh-day Adventists. But I would suggest that that's not the real reason, because many Seventh-day Adventists do eat meat. The thing that they all have in common is they're very committed to observing the Sabbath day, where they refrain from work, attend worship services, and connect with friends and family. Part of aligning our lives more fully with God's natural design is observing the Sabbath day and keeping it holy. God has designed our spirits to connect intimately with Him. He's designed our minds to enjoy our work or our occupation, but to take regular time off from that work to be refreshed and recharge our batteries. And He's, of course, designed our bodies to rest periodically. He's also designed us to connect with other human beings on a regular basis. All of those things are health promoting, and it just so happens that all of those needs are addressed through the fourth commandment to observe the Sabbath day once a week and keep it holy. When I was a kid growing up in Massachusetts, I would mow my grandparents' lawn and they would pay me. But they wouldn't let me mow the lawn on Sundays, the day they observed the Sabbath. For me, as a kid, I knew nothing about biblical principles, and I thought that not being able to mow the lawn on Sundays was a restriction and an unnecessary burden. Now that I'm an adult with a career and a family of my own, I know quite well taking a day of rest once a week is not a burden, it's a blessing. I now know that my grandparents were simply taking the fourth commandment, or rather the principle we learned from the fourth commandment, to heart. I'm old enough to remember a time in this nation where we had blue laws in effect, where most businesses were closed on Sundays. One of the more recent examples of that was Publix supermarkets. They're based in Florida, and they're very big in the Southeast. And when I was a teenager, Publix supermarkets were closed on Sundays. Many of the stores had a sign out front on Sundays in the window that said, "See you in church." In 1983, Publix, as a corporation, caved into economic pressure and began opening stores on Sundays. Nowadays, the only big retail business I can point to that's closed on Sundays is Chick-fil-A. Now, a Harvard MBA would say Chick-fil-A's move to refrain from opening on Sundays is a poor economic decision because they're forfeiting 14% of their revenue. Once again, God's wisdom is superior to man's. 1 Corinthians 1:25 says, "The foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men." That same truth is also expressed in the other direction. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 19 says, "For the wisdom of this world is foolishness before God." Chick-fil-A is rocking the restaurant world with their success. Even though Chick-fil-A is closed one day in 7, the average Chick-fil-A store takes in more annual revenue than the average McDonald's, Starbucks, and Taco Bell combined. A Chick-fil-A store, on average, grosses about $4.5 million a year. The average McDonald's, around $2 million. So a Chick-fil-A store grosses more than double the revenue than a McDonald's. So although it doesn't make economic sense to be closed on Sundays, Chick-fil-A is shattering all those economic models with the wisdom of God. What at first glance seems like a burden ends up being a blessing. That's why Jesus said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light," Matthew 11:30. And we also see in 1 John chapter 5, verse 3, "For this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not burdensome." In fact, God's word says that by keeping the commitment to observe the Sabbath day, there are blessings that will flow into our lives as a result. Isaiah chapter 58, verses 13 and 14 says this, "If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath, and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight, and not doing as you please, then you will find your joy in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the heights of the land, and to feast on the inheritance of your father Jacob. The mouth of the Lord has spoken." One of the reasons for Chick-fil-A's success is that when people can't buy a Chick-fil-A meal on a Sunday, they have a stronger desire for it on the other 6 days of the week. In other words, people are more ready to shell out some money and buy a Chick-fil-A meal when they've fasted from it one day a week. In the same fashion, we have a stronger desire to be more energetic, enthusiastic, and productive with our work if we've taken a break from our work one day a week. This is part of God's design, and it's what we call natural law. Another example of this principle at work is our evening fast. Our bodies are designed to take a break from food each day. Unless you're getting up in the middle of the night for a midnight snack, Most of us abstain completely from food in the evening when we're sleeping. This gives our systems a rest and allows our digestive system to do some house cleaning and detoxification. And that allows us to be better prepared for the morning meal. That's why we call our first meal of the day breakfast. We're supposed to be breaking our fast with our first meal of the day. Okay, all that to say this. Yes, the fourth commandment is part of the Old Testament law given to the ancient Jewish nation, and we don't live by the law anymore because Jesus fulfilled the law. But there are principles we can learn from it, and one of those health-building principles is to take one day a week and abstain from work, rest and recharge our batteries, worship God, and connect with friends and family. If we do, it sure will be beneficial to our health and well-being. Okay, that brings us to today's guest, Joe Sanok. Joe is an author. He's published 5 books. His latest book is called Thursday is the New Friday. He's a productivity researcher. He's a keynote and TEDx speaker. His podcast is called The Practice of the Practice, which is one of the top 50 most listened to podcasts worldwide. Joe is a business consultant. He writes for Psych Central, and he's been featured in Huffington Post, Forbes, Reader's Digest, Yahoo News, and he's a regular guest on Entrepreneurs on Fire, one of the most popular business podcasts on the internet. Joe, welcome to Natural Health Matters.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy. Well, you've got a new book coming out. It's called Thursday is the New Friday. And I want to expand upon this concept a little bit. The Bible says that we should take one day off in 7 to rest. And you've expanded upon this very good concept. And I want to talk about how that can help us and how it connects to our overall health and well-being, if we could.
Yeah, absolutely. If we go back to 1926, when Henry Ford started the 40-hour work week, that was a huge step forward for the evolution of humans. People working 10 to 16 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. So, at that point, that was a big step. But in a lot of ways, we've outgrown that. We end up spending our weekends, even if we do take them off, running to soccer practice, getting groceries, mowing the lawn. And is it even a day of rest right now? And
That's
so,
right.
That idea of, hey, maybe our best and most creative work could actually come if we genuinely slowed down. So like even this past weekend, my 6, almost 7-year-old, she slept until 10:30, which blew my mind. Usually she just springs out of bed. And I gave myself permission to just sleep until she slept. So I slept until 10:30. And so it was amazing to just have this slow paced day. We went to the beach with friends. And how much more ready am I on Monday morning when I had a weekend where I can just take some deep breaths, can enjoy nature, spend time with friends and family. And then I can do the work that I'm called to do throughout the week, instead of just entering that work week feeling burned out for the rest of the week.
Absolutely. I remember Lee Iacocca, the CEO of Chrysler, you might know this quote. He was saying that one of his VPs was bragging about how he never took any vacations. And he said, that's really poor time management. You will be far more productive if you take some time off. So go take your vacation. Get out of here right now.
Yeah. I love that commercial where the kids are chanting like one more day. And it's like this credit card commercial, but it's like getting their parents to just have one more vacation day, even though we have all these vacation days we don't use in a year. It's like, well, why? Your employer's given it to you. We need to set these boundaries so that we can be present for our families and present for the important work that we're doing.
Absolutely. If we never reboot our computers, they wouldn't work so good, right? They need a little fresh start. And human beings are like that. We need a little refreshment. We've got to charge our batteries now and then. And when we do, we're healthier and more productive for it. I would like to just ask you, what caused you to probe this subject more? Was there an event in your life that triggered that?
Yeah, in 2012, that was a really rough year for my family. My oldest daughter, right before her first birthday, had open heart surgery. And I was working full time at a community college, 40 hours a week, had a side counseling practice, and then also had a podcast I was launching. And everything's fine with my daughter now. She has no health concerns or limitations.
Praise God.
But about 2 weeks after the doctors had said, the surgery was great, she's healthy, she's going to be fine, and that sense of relief comes, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And so I'm back into the medical system and have, radioactive iodine treatment and all this treatment, get my thyroid removed and a bunch of glands. And, now I'm almost 10 years past that. But 2012 really represented this big question of, do I want to continue at this pace? And what was tough is I loved my job at the community college. It wasn't like this corporate job where I would just love to drop the mic and walk away from it. I had a lot of autonomy. I had a wonderful supervisor. It was less about leaving something that was bad and more about pursuing something that was good. And to say, would I rather stay here and never know if I have something in me to do something bigger? Or would I rather go out into the world and try to do a counseling practice, try to do this podcast, try to launch big things that impact the world and potentially fail? And to me, I really realized that taking that risk to try to jump into the world, to create the schedule that I wanted, to do what felt healthier for me personally, but also with my family, with my friends, with just the pace that to me felt sustainable over a lifetime, to not burn out. That's where it really started. And I started to really dig into the research and dig into how other people were doing things. One of the things I started doing was these time experiments. For one summer after I left my full-time job, I took Fridays off for that summer as just an experiment. In the fall, I can look at it, I can add it back in if I want to. But financially, every single month was better than the month before when I took Fridays off. And so then I kept doing these time experiments and learning what the research said. And even looking at some experiments that the University of Illinois did, they found that if you just take a 1-minute break every 20 minutes, that you can completely eliminate vigilance decrement. So vigilance, how well you pay attention to something, decrement meaning breaking down over time. Basically, if you're doing a boring task, you can pay attention as well at the end of that task if you just take 1-minute breaks. And so over an hour period of time, we see that even just these micro breaks can really make an impact. And so it's not always just a 3-day weekend. It can just be a 1-minute break every 20 minutes over the period of an hour. And then you eliminate vigilance decrement. You do as well at the end of that hour as you did at the beginning. So there's all these kind of neuroscience hacks that we're learning that science has emerged with over the last few years that we can actually use now to help our brains align with how they're meant to be aligned.
Excellent. You may not know this. I'm a naturopathic doctor, but I'm also an airline captain. And we sit in that cockpit for sometimes hours at a time. And you know that when you're having to focus for a long period of time, that your performance goes down. It really does. And sometimes when you're at the end of a long flight, you wish you had had a break, but we don't get it. And it's even more pronounced when we're in the simulator, when things are really, really intense. We're doing one emergency after another. We might do a 2.5, 3 hour session. And I can tell you from personal experience, by the end of that session, you are burning out. It really does make a difference. You're not at your peak, for sure.
Yeah.
So can you share some more of the highlights that you learned during the book writing process, some of the low-hanging fruit that people can apply to their lives?
Yeah, I think so. The book is broken down into kind of 3 major areas. The first one is our internal inclinations. And so we're looking at high achievers. What are the 3 things that research supports that continue to show up over and over in these people? And so the first one is curiosity, that we enter into things with the sense of being curious instead of saying, it's black and white, it's pass, it's fail in most situations. Of course, if you're a pilot, you want to pass every time. Yeah. But, most things in our life don't have that high of stakes. So having a sense of curiosity and being able to say, well, that's really interesting why that happened. I wonder what's going on there. Instead of, ooh, I failed, I screwed up. To have that sense of kind of a curious mind. The second internal inclination that we discovered was that an outsider's perspective actually gives you statistically more information than just being an insider. And so, we've all had this experience where maybe you get hired at a new job and then you're learning all their systems and you say, why do they do it that way? That seems like it's counterproductive. Or why do they have that double paperwork here? That as an outsider, when you're coming in, you actually have more power and more influence than someone that's on the inside. And then the third internal inclination is that we really want to have the ability to move on it. So we have speed and we have accuracy along a line. Now, when you're a pilot, you want to be 100% accurate. But in most things in life, speed is going to trump accuracy most of the time. And so a lot of times people are paralyzed by perfection. They overthink things. They want it to be perfect when they put it out in the world. But in reality, whether that's a blog post or something creative or even something that is one of the pieces of marketing within a business, getting that out there and then allowing that to be able to be iterated and see the results is kind of the first 3 low-hanging fruit we see with those internal inclinations.
I see that. Excellent. I love this idea of staying curious because it sounds more like what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we don't want to beat ourselves up, right? We want to be able to not self-deprecate in the process of learning how we can do things better. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And so what we're seeing is that whether it's in marketing or parenting or just in life, that when something goes wrong, quote, I do quotes wrong, that we need to just analyze it. We need to see it as data. So say I run a Facebook ads campaign to promote my book and I spent $1,000 and absolutely no one buys the book or clicks on it, but I spent all this money. Well, sure, I wouldn't like giving up $1,000. That would be terrible. I wouldn't enjoy that. But if I approach it as a curious person, I can say, okay, what was it about this campaign that gives me information for the future? We often hear how many times Abraham Lincoln failed before he became president, or all these other, innovators, that it's often in that failing that we learn and we iterate and we change and we're curious, that then we can finally get to that final product that we never would have got to had we not had all those failures before it.
Right. So we don't want to view things as failures, but as learning experiences to make us better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in the second part of the book, we dive into slowing down. So most books, will be on maybe the productivity side. Here's the 5 steps that you have to take to do this. You're either in or you're out. I would say that this book is different in that it's more a menu to say you're a smart individual. You can figure out for yourself what works, what doesn't. Here's how you do experiments. Here's how you look at the menu and see all the options of the neuroscience that you want to apply to your own life. So on one side, we have often these productivity books that are very prescriptive, or on the other side, we have these woo-woo books that just say, put it up on a vision board, manifest it to the universe, and don't do any work and just see how things happen. And these two kinds of books rarely meet each other. And that's where I would say that this book actually brings both sides together to say, both sides have tremendous value. We need to slow down before we can speed up. And so we need to actually get centered, get grounded, get into that sense of flow before we can jump into the work. And so that last section is when we're ready to work, how do we absolutely kill it? So then we look at all the neuroscience, we look at all these productivity hacks and say, once you've slowed down first, we do that first, that's when we can really speed up. And how we do that to really do it based on the science and what we see working in case studies.
What I'm thinking about is this podcast is about health and wellness, is that there's a school of thought out there that says, well, I'm just going to think positive thoughts and this is going to be better for my health. And I would say that's probably futile. So you can't believe your way into being healthy, but it sure does help. Right. And I know that Zig Ziglar, the famous motivational speaker, he was asked that question at a conference, and I heard him say, well, no, you can't believe your way into a success. But if you believe you can succeed, it sure will increase the chances of success. And I think that's what you're saying here about incorporating the neuroscience along with our goals.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about is acting as if. This book launches October 5th. And so I'm entering into all of these podcasts with the posture and with the way that I approach it as if I'm going to be a New York Times bestseller. I'm wanting that to happen. That's something that, sure, someone could say I manifested or whatever, but I'm approaching it saying, if I'm going to be a New York Times bestseller, let's reverse engineer that. Let's look at what do those kind of books look like? What do those kind of authors do? How many podcast interviews does that person do? So I can manifest it to the universe or have a positive mindset all I want. But if I don't then actually say, well, how do I then show up like a New York Times bestseller? Well, I need to have clear talking points. I need to understand my book. I need to be able to quickly resonate the message with people. And so they work together. And that's where I think oftentimes we see one side critique it and say, well, you're just believing it and then nothing happens. And it's like, well, of course, but that mindset is going to also inform how I show up, how I think, how I prepare. And so when we mix that slowing down with that speeding up, it's amazing what ends up happening.
I love it. Great stuff. Joe, I think your book is going to be a New York Times bestseller. This is an awesome topic. If someone wants to get a copy of the book or learn more about you, how would they go about that?
Absolutely. So they can go wherever they get their books. That could be at a local bookstore. It could be Amazon, wherever you prefer to buy your books. It's available everywhere. The book is Thursday is the New Friday. It's all about how the 4-day work week boosts productivity and creativity. So you can buy it wherever you buy books. And then if you want to read more about my work, you can just go to joesanok.com. We're bringing together experiments that people are doing. We have book clubs there, all sorts of ways that people are connecting with each other, because this isn't just going to be my movement. This is going to be a revolution that we do together, that we work together to say, this is what's working. This is how we're applying it to small businesses, large businesses, individual businesses, our families. And we want to share those experiments with people over at joesanok.com.
Thank you, Joe, so much. And I just want to wrap up with this is when you have a truth, when you're dealing with truth, it applies to really all areas of life. You can apply these truths to business. You can apply it to your health. You can apply it to your family. And it just works everywhere because it's true.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Joe Sanok. He's a great guy. And I encourage you to pick up a copy of his book. I'll put a link to his book in the show notes. This is a really important topic because most of us feel in our society today, we feel as though working all the time or 7 days a week, we're more productive. But biblical wisdom says otherwise. And once again, scientific evidence is catching up with what the Bible has been teaching for thousands of years. Take 1 day off in 7, you won't regret it. For more, go to davidsandstrom.com. In the show notes for each episode, you'll find links to all the resources that were mentioned, as well as a full transcript with timestamps that you can download for free. In addition, I always include a content upgrade with each show, which is a free download that is designed to help you go deeper with that subject. Once again, thank you for listening, and I'll talk with you next week. Be blessed.